Have you ever wondered how people with primitive tools could cut granite? These stone blocks weigh hundreds of tons, yet they are fitted so tightly that not even a knife blade can pass between them. Strange, isn't it? History textbooks claim that ancient builders only possessed copper chisels and hemp ropes. But when we see drill marks that cannot be replicated even with modern diamond drills, the official version becomes incredibly difficult to believe. Is it merely a coincidence that similar technologies are found in Peru, Egypt, and Japan, even though these civilizations were separated by thousands of kilometers and thousands of years? Today, we embark on a journey through 6 of the planet's most enigmatic locations. Archaeologists have debated these sites for decades, but today we will attempt to separate the mysticism from the actual facts. Prepare yourselves, because what you are about to discover might completely overturn your understanding of humanity's past. Our first stop is the island of Java in Indonesia. For centuries, local inhabitants would visit Mount Gunung Padang to pray to the spirits of their ancestors, simply considering it a sacred hill topped with old stones. Everything changed in 2010 when geologists arrived, not to pray, but to work. They began scanning the soil with ground-penetrating radar, hoping to study the region's seismic activity. But their instruments revealed something shocking. Beneath layers of earth and grass was not an ordinary mountain, but a gigantic, man-made structure. When scientists conducted radiocarbon dating on organic material found between stones at a depth of 30 meters, the results forced them to recheck their equipment. The test indicated an age of approximately 20,000 years. To grasp the sheer scale of this, imagine a time during the depths of the last ice age, when woolly mammoths still roamed the earth, and the construction of the Egyptian pyramids was still a distant 15,000 years in the future. This news instantly exploded across the internet, shattering the conventional view of our world. According to mainstream science, humans 20,000 years ago were simple hunter-gatherers, living in caves and crude shelters. They simply couldn't have physically organized construction on such a massive scale, as they lacked states or agriculture to feed an army of workers. Alternative history enthusiasts immediately declared Gunung Padang as proof of Atlantis or another highly advanced civilization that perished during a global flood. After all, who else could have possessed the technology to create the world's oldest pyramid, if not a forgotten race of giants or extraterrestrials who taught our ancestors? However, the reality turned out to be a bit more prosaic, though no less fascinating. Once the initial excitement subsided, geologists explained the nature of these enigmatic stone blocks. They are what's known as columnar basalts, a phenomenon that occurs when lava in a volcanic vent cools and cracks into perfectly hexagonal columns. In essence, nature itself cast the bricks for this pyramid, not some alien factory. But the most astonishing aspect lies elsewhere. Ancient people truly did discover this site and, without complex machinery, managed to transport thousands of these heavy columns to reinforce the slopes and create terraces. This wasn't construction from scratch, but a monumental modification of a natural landscape. The primary mystery here isn't about lasers, but about sociology. How did tribes of hunter-gatherers manage to unite and work together for centuries toward a single goal, without kings or overseers? In Indonesia, people simply utilized what nature provided, merely relocating preformed stones. But what lies in India cannot be explained by nature, because there, the builders didn't construct a mountain. They methodically demolished one to create a masterpiece that remains impossible to replicate. Welcome to the state of Maharashtra and the Kailasa Temple. When you first behold this structure, your mind struggles to comprehend how it was made. Typically, buildings are constructed from the ground up, laying foundations, then walls, and finally the roof. Here, everything is reversed. This temple, as tall as a 9-story building, isn't built from blocks. It was entirely carved out of a single, colossal rock face, from the top down. Imagine a sculptor taking a stone and chipping away everything superfluous to reveal a statue. Now imagine that statue is a massive complex with columns, halls, elephant statues, and intricate carvings, where every detail is part of a single monolith. To create this marvel, workers had to excavate and remove 200,000 tons of volcanic rock from the quarry. If you loaded this stone into freight cars, the train would stretch for 40 kilometers. And most astonishingly, the architects had no margin for error. If a stonecutter accidentally chipped off part of an elephant statue's trunk, it couldn't be glued back on or replaced. The entire temple would be irrevocably ruined. Official plaques state that the temple was built in just 18 years in the 8th century CE. And here begins the mathematics that confounds researchers. If you divide 200,000 tons by 18 years, it means workers would have had to excavate and remove about 30 tons of stone every single day, without weekends, holidays, or breaks, through rain and heat. And that's not even counting the time spent on planning and delicate carving. Many are convinced that it's simply impossible to achieve this with picks and hammers. In popular online theories, it's suggested that ancient Indians used lost technologies, from giant machines whose marks are supposedly visible on the walls, to directed sound capable of softening stone, or even lasers left by alien visitors. How else could such speed and precision be explained, especially when creating a similar monument today would still be an engineering nightmare? However, the solution lies not in extraterrestrial technologies, but in a brilliant organization of labor. Engineers have explained that the secret to the speed was the method of vertical excavation. Workers didn't need to lift heavy stones upwards, as in pyramid construction. Gravity worked in their favor, as debris was simply dropped downwards. As for tools, ancient masters used steel wedges. They would drill a series of holes in the rock, insert dry wooden wedges, and then pour water over them. The wood would swell with tremendous force, splitting the stone precisely along the desired line. But the most crucial resource ancient kings possessed was people. Thousands of stonecutters worked in shifts, around the clock, transforming the rock into a work of art. Kailasa is not a monument to forgotten technologies, but to human perseverance and discipline, which can sometimes be more powerful than any laser. This temple stood for centuries, astonishing pilgrims, but the next structure was hidden from humanity's eyes beneath the water's surface until a solitary diver, simply searching for sharks, accidentally noticed it. We travel to Japan, to the country's westernmost point, Yonaguni Island. In 1986, diving instructor Kahachiro Aratake plunged into these waters looking for a new spot to observe hammerhead sharks. But instead of fish, he saw something on the seabed that took his breath away. Before him rose a colossal stone mass resembling a stepped pyramid or a fortress. Aratake observed perfectly flat terraces, precise right angles that looked like man-made steps, and even strange formations resembling a road encircling the monument. The object's size is staggering. It stretches 150 meters long and 40 meters wide. When news of the discovery reached the mainland, the world began speaking of a Japanese Atlantis. The problem is that this city lies underwater. The ocean level in this area was only this low during the last ice age, approximately 10,000 years ago. If this is indeed a man-made city, it predates the Egyptian pyramids and Sumerian cities by 5,000 years. Proponents of a lost civilization theory claim it's the remnants of the legendary continent of Mu, the Pacific equivalent of Atlantis. They point to details that are difficult to attribute to nature. 2 round holes on the edge of a slab, appearing to be settings for columns, and a rock formation resembling a giant turtle or human head facing south. Who, if not a forgotten great civilization, could have built such a port before it was swallowed by the ocean? The scientific community is divided into 2 camps. Archaeologists skeptically shake their heads, but geologists offer an interesting explanation. The Yonaguni rock consists of sandstone and argillite, types of rock that tend to fracture along straight lines when tectonic plates move. Strong underwater currents have, for centuries, washed away smaller stones, leaving behind only larger blocks with remarkably flat surfaces. What we perceive as steps and terraces is, therefore, the result of natural forces, not architects. However, there's a nuance that even skeptics agree upon. It's plausible that nature created the basic framework, a rough draft, and ancient people who lived there before the rising sea levels refined it. They could have used these natural platforms as a quarry or a sanctuary, straightening angles and carving out passages. So, the truth is likely somewhere in the middle. It's a masterpiece created in collaboration between nature and humankind. Water knows how to keep secrets, but sometimes the earth hides them even more securely. In Turkey, a farmer simply wanted to renovate his basement and instead found an entrance to a real underworld. where thousands of people hid for centuries. Imagine renovating your home, tearing down an old wall in the basement, and suddenly discovering a dark tunnel leading to nowhere. This is exactly what happened in 1963 to an ordinary resident of the Cappadocia region in Turkey. He had no idea that behind his wall lay not just a cellar, but the entrance to one of the largest underground cities in the world, Derinkuyu. When archaeologists arrived and began excavations, they were shocked by the sheer scale. It wasn't just a couple of caves, but a true metropolis, descending 18 stories underground. Here, in complete darkness, 20,000 people, along with their livestock, could simultaneously live, eat, and sleep. They had everything: schools, churches, wine cellars, oil presses, and sheep pens. But the most unsettling aspect is the depth. Shafts plunge 85 meters down, and air circulates through an ingenious ventilation system that is impossible to detect from the surface. Why would anyone voluntarily live underground, like moles without sunlight? Conspiracy theorists immediately put forward the idea that Derinkuyu was built as a bunker in case of a global catastrophe. Perhaps ancient people were hiding from a past nuclear war, an ice age, or even an invasion by extraterrestrials patrolling the skies. Supporters of the paleocontact theory point to strange security measures: narrow corridors where only one person can pass at a time, and massive, half-ton stone wheel doors that could only be closed from the inside. From whom were they so desperately defending themselves? Historians offer a more earthly, yet no less dramatic explanation. Derinkuyu was indeed a refuge, but not from aliens. It was from very real human invaders. These lands were an arena of wars for centuries. First Roman raids, then Arab, then Mongol. Local inhabitants exploited the softness of volcanic tuff, a rock that is easily cut while deep within the earth, but hardens quickly upon contact with air, becoming as strong as concrete. This made it an ideal fortification project. When an enemy approached, the entire population of the city simply disappeared underground, sealing the entrances with massive stones. Enemies could walk on the surface, completely unaware that life was bustling directly beneath their feet. This monument is not just to fear, but to an incredible will to live and the ingenuity of people cornered. Derinkuyu was a refuge for the living, where people escaped war. But in the Pacific Ocean, there is a place that locals call the City of the Dead, a place they fear to sail near at night, even today. If you find yourself in the middle of the vast Pacific on the tiny island of Pohnpei, the locals will surely warn you: never stay in the ruins of Nan Madol after sunset. By day, the place appears to be a marvel of engineering. At night, according to the islanders, the spirits of ancient kings awaken here, and they do not welcome uninvited guests. Nan Madol is the world's only ancient city built not on solid ground, but directly on the water amidst mangrove swamps and coral reefs. This isn't just a few huts on stilts. It consists of 92 artificial islands, created by humans, connected by a network of canals, which is why the place earned the nickname Venice of the Pacific. But unlike romantic Italy, an atmosphere of heavy, oppressive grandeur pervades here. The city walls rise 8 meters above the water, the height of a 3-story building. They are constructed from thousands of basalt logs. Each of these stone columns weighs between 5 and 50 tons. If you add up all the stones used in Nan Madol's construction, you get a staggering figure of 750,000 tons. To grasp the scale of this insanity, it's comparable to the volume of stone in the Great Pyramid of Giza. But the pyramid was built by all of ancient Egypt, with its million-strong population and developed economy. Pohnpei, by anthropologists' estimates, was home to at most 25,000 people at that time. They had no metal, no wheels, no complex machinery. Yet, they somehow managed to move these colossal blocks from quarries on the other side of the island, transport them through jungles, swamps, and marshes, and then meticulously place them in the water with ideal precision. Local residents still believe this place is cursed, and they have reason to think so. In 1907, German Governor Victor Berg, who governed the island, decided to challenge the legends. Despite the pleas of the locals, he opened one of the ancient rulers' tombs in the center of Nan Madol. Berg triumphed, finding within the bones of giants, far larger than ordinary humans. But his triumph was short-lived. The very next morning, the governor suddenly died in terrible agony, and doctors could not determine the cause of death. The locals said then, and still say now, he disturbed the peace of the Sauteleurs. The mystery of Nan Madol's construction has puzzled researchers for decades. How could a 50-ton stone column be dragged through jungles where there are no roads? Wheels would instantly get bogged down in the mud. Dragging it? The friction would be so immense that thousands of people would be required, a number simply not present on the island. That's why magic became the most popular theory among locals and mysticism enthusiasts. Legends claim the city was built by two twin brothers, Alisopa and Alisipa, who arrived from across the sea. They were said to be powerful sorcerers, capable of controlling gravity. They would sit on the shore and play magical instruments, and to these sounds, huge basalt blocks would lift into the air and fly to their designated places like birds. Proponents of the paleocontact theory go even further. They point to strange magnetic anomalies often detected in the Nan Madol area. Compasses sometimes go haywire here, and electronics malfunction. Conspiracy theorists believe that the basalt columns are not merely building materials, but elements of a gigantic energy installation or antenna left by aliens. Indeed, from a bird's-eye view, the city's layout does resemble a complex microchip, with the canals serving as conductors. Perhaps that's why Victor Berg died. He simply fell victim to residual radiation or an unknown emission. Scientists, of course, don't believe in levitation, but even they admit that Nan Madol's engineers were logistical geniuses. The secret to transporting the stones was discovered when archaeologists decided to stop guessing and start experimenting. They realized that dragging stones over land was foolish. The islanders used the ocean. Basalt columns were suspended beneath large rafts made of bamboo and wood. In water, stone becomes slightly lighter, and the buoyancy of the rafts prevented it from sinking. But how did they lift 50 tons to a height of 8 meters without cranes? Here, the inclined plane method was used. Builders laid logs crisscross, similar to how wooden cabins are built, but using stone. They used palm tree trunks as levers, gradually raising the structure layer by layer. But the most interesting discovery concerns not the technology, but the reason for the construction. Why expend so much effort? The answer turned out to be chillingly cynical. Nan Madol was built by the Sauteleur dynasty not as a temple or a fortress. It was a golden cage. The emperor commanded all local chiefs and their families to move and live in this stone city. Sounds like an honor, but it was, in reality, a form of control. On these artificial islands, there were no sources of fresh water, nor any means to grow food. Everything, from coconuts to a sip of water, had to be brought in by boat from the mainland. The chiefs found themselves completely dependent on the emperor. If anyone planned a rebellion, their food supplies would simply be cut off. Nan Madol was arguably history's first elite concentration camp, where architecture served as an instrument of absolute tyranny. The engineers of Nan Madol used cunning to control people, but the creators of our next site possessed a technology for processing matter that would baffle even modern specialists with laser equipment. We return to Egypt to descend into an underground complex that is more terrifying than any curse. Everyone knows about the Giza pyramids and the Sphinx, but the true enigma of Egypt is hidden not beneath the scorching sun, but deep underground, in a place called the Serapeum in Saqqara. Its discovery story is worthy of a Hollywood film. In 1850, French archaeologist Auguste Mariette stumbled upon a sphinx head protruding from the sand. He began digging and uncovered an avenue of statues that led him to a sealed underground entrance. To gain entry, Mariette had to use explosives. So mighty was the stone plug sealing the passage. When the dust settled and archaeologists entered with torches, they found themselves in a world of eternal darkness and silence. Galleries stretched for hundreds of meters, carved directly into the bedrock. But what stood in the niches along the sides made the researchers freeze. These were 24 gigantic sarcophagi, black, pink, and gray granite. The dimensions of these boxes are mind-boggling. About 4 meters long, over 3 meters high. Each weighs between 70 and 100 tons. That's like 2 adult tanks or a herd of elephants. On top of them lay lids weighing 30 tons each. When Mariette approached one of the sarcophagi, he noticed a detail that sent a chill down his spine. The layer of dust on the floor was undisturbed. It bore the footprints of workers who had left 3,000 years ago. This meant no one had plundered the site. The sarcophagi stood sealed. Archaeologists were convinced that inside lay the mummies of sacred Apis bulls, adorned with gold and jewels. But when, with incredible effort, a lid was finally shifted, absolute emptiness, a vacuum, was found inside. No bones, no gold, no dust, only perfectly polished black stone. This very fact, the emptiness inside the most elaborate ancient containers, has spawned dozens of theories. Why create a 100-ton safe if nothing is stored within? And here we come to the quality of workmanship, which cannot be explained by a chisel and hammer. Engineer Christopher Dunn, who investigated the Serapeum, placed a precision square against the wall of a sarcophagus, and he saw no gap. The surface was perfectly flat, with an error of mere fractions of a human hair. Furthermore, the internal corners were perfect 90-degree angles. Try to imagine this. A stonecutter would need to climb inside a granite box, and in cramped conditions, by the light of an oil lamp, polish the hardest stone to achieve optical precision. One wrong move and the surface would be ruined. Alternative history enthusiasts are convinced the Serapeum is a technical facility. The sarcophagi are made of granite, which contains a lot of quartz. Quartz, when compressed, can generate electricity. The theory posits that these boxes could have been part of a giant battery or even a teleportation device. Others consider them shelters for preserving the gene pool from radiation, as thick granite is an excellent shield. Or perhaps the beings stored there simply teleported or ascended, leaving the capsules empty. Egyptologists, of course, reject theories involving teleporters. They point to inscriptions found on some sarcophagi. These are crudely scratched hieroglyphs that starkly contrast with the ideal polish of the stone itself. Scholars believe that the sarcophagi were made by Old Kingdom masters, possessing forgotten technologies. Then, millennia later, more primitive descendants found them and attempted to use them for their cults, clumsily inscribing, "Here lies the bull." As for the technology, science proposes a version using copper saws and corundum or quartz sand as an abrasive. Experiments have shown that copper can indeed cut granite if tons of sand are poured under it, but the speed of such sawing is a few millimeters per hour. To create one such sarcophagus by hand would have required decades of continuous work by an entire team of masters. But the main question, to which science still has no clear answer, is logistics. The Serapeum tunnels are narrow. Two people can barely pass each other. How were 100-ton blocks dragged in there? How were they rotated at right angles in the cramped corridors? And most importantly, how were the sarcophagi lowered into niches that are below floor level and carefully covered with 30-ton lids, without hydraulics? The gap between the niche wall and the sarcophagus is sometimes only 40 centimeters. There simply isn't room to place levers or people. The Serapeum remains, perhaps, the most inconvenient artifact for historians, because here we see a result that would be incredibly difficult to replicate even with our modern cranes and machinery. Today, we have traveled an incredible path. We have seen a pyramid older than history itself. We descended 18 stories underground in Turkey and tried to understand the logic of builders who moved mountains in India and Egypt. These objects are scattered across different continents, but they are united by one thing. They challenge our understanding of what is possible. It's easy to attribute everything to aliens or magic. It's much more challenging but more important to acknowledge another fact. Ancient people were not primitive. Yes, they didn't have iPhones, lasers, or the internet, but they possessed something we often lack today: time, patience, and a grand purpose for which they were willing to work for generations. Looking at these megaliths, we realize that humanity is capable of incredible things. Perhaps we haven't lost the technologies of the past. Perhaps we have simply forgotten what humanity is capable of when guided by belief, not algorithms. And who knows what our descendants will unearth 10,000 years from now at the sites of our cities? Will they also marvel at our achievements or consider them an unexplainable mystery? Write in the comments which of these structures impressed you the most. And don't forget to subscribe, because history holds many more secrets for us to uncover. See you next time.